So this is a highly controversial topic that I'm going to talk about today. A lot of you are going to feel passionately about this one way or the other. I'm sure, I promise you, that some of you are going to be arguing down below in the comments. Hopefully you guys keep it, PG and don't call each other names. It's fine to agree to disagree. Just, keep it cordial, be tactful about it. And I'm sure some of you are going to be, disagree with what I have to say about this. But anyway, I'm going to talk today about one of the heated discussions in the African cichlid hobby, and that is, can you mix Mbuna and Peacocks together in the same tank? Hey fish friends, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Zenzo from TazawaTanks.com. Before I get started, I do want to address something real quickly because I've gotten a lot of comments about these. Some of you haven't seen the comments because it gets held in my file for review. So there are certain words that get held for review in comments so they don't automatically become published. And if I look at that, and if I think it really shouldn't be published, then I will delete that comment or remove it. But back here, I'm down here in the fish room, by the way. So there's 30 tanks down here in the fish room for those of you that are new to my channel. There are 30 tanks down here. I do have a bunch of tanks upstairs as well. Just gonna turn on some lights here. But anyway, back here in this corner, I've got my dehumidifier turned off right now. But behind there, behind those curtains, people are asking what I'm doing back there because there's a light on. Am I growing something? Am I growing, some marijuana, essentially? And the answer is no. I mean, people are asking me about growing, whatever. I don't know. I don't do that. But anyway, I'm going to take you back here real quick and show you guys that I'm not growing any pot or anything like that. It's just junk. It's just a bunch of storage. So let me flip the camera around. So as you can see, it's just a bunch of nonsense. I've just got old tanks back there, lights, old filters. I keep the central air pump back there, etc., etc. So anyway, nothing going on back there. There's nothing exciting. It's just some old canister filters I'm hanging on the backs, a bunch of lighting that I don't use anymore. I keep spare tanks, spare parts. It's just kind of a storage room that I have. I could expand the fish room back there and add some more tanks. I don't really feel like I need to right now. This is plenty of tanks for me to manage. But anyway, let me set the camera down and we'll talk about Mbuna and Peacocks together. Alright, so let's jump right in. So the topic again is, can you mix Mbuna and Peacock cichlids together? We're talking about African cichlids from Lake Malawi. So I'm going to give you a couple different answers and I'm going to talk about why I have an opinion on this. And hopefully you guys can make a decision based on what I share and other research that you do before you choose to mix Peacocks and Mbuna together, or if you already do that, this might be something for you to consider as you continue on with keeping your fish the way that you're keeping them. So let's talk briefly about Mbuna and let's talk briefly about Peacocks, Alanacara. I've made other videos before. I'll put a link up here on the video that I made that kind of goes into more depth about the Peacock cichlids, Alanacara, and Mbuna and kind of their characteristics and how to take care of them. But basically, real quick, just kind of the Cliff Notes version. Mbuna are African cichlids from Lake Malawi that are more interested in kind of swimming in and out of rocks and hiding places. They don't have the same swimming behaviors as peacocks do. They have a traditionally more of a plant-based diet, so in the wild they will eat some invertebrates and things like that they find, snails and crustaceans and things like that. In addition, they eat a lot of algae in the wild, so their makeup, their body chemistry is really designed to have that more plant-based diet. Peacocks, on the other hand, are more open water swimmers, also from Lake Malawi, so the water is the same, but they prefer to have more space to swim. Now they will utilize some hiding places at times, usually to kind of hide from other fish, but they will use it. But they also are have a higher protein-based diet, so you can feed them some pellets that have some algae in them, etc., but they do prefer to have a more meat-based diet. Meat not meaning land-based meat, so no terrestrial foods, no beef or chicken or anything like that. Meat meaning like fish, so piscivore, so meaning that they would eat other fish, other crustaceans, things like that. So anyway, those are kind of the main two differences between Mbuna and Peacocks. as far as size, they can be pretty similar. Peacocks get a little bit bigger than Mbuna, but I have seen some pretty large Mbuna in the past. But overall, that's kind of the main differences between the two, is kind of how they swim, how they behave as far as, in the tank environment, and what they eat. So one of the questions that always comes up, and I get these questions, I promise you, almost every day. I'm reading some comment from one of my 200 videos about can they keep, Mbuna and peacocks together, etc., or I'll read about it in, Facebook posts and things like that. So the answer is going to be yes and no. So let's talk about the first part. Can you keep Mbuna and peacocks together? That answer is yes. Now let's take a little bit further analysis and look a little bit deeper into keeping these fish, and let's ask the question, should you keep Mbuna and peacocks together? So my answer is going to be kind of both ways. So it's going to be yes and no. So yes, you can keep peacocks and Mbuna together. They're from the same water. They as far as the requirements for the water chemistry, the pH level, temperature, etc., that is all the same. As far as tank size, for the most part, they're going to require similar tank size, although you might want a little bit larger tank for your peacocks and your Mbuna. So you could do like a 55-gallon tank for your Mbuna, but for peacocks, I would recommend 75 or larger. So 75, 90, etc., going larger. If you are, super on top of taking care of your fish with filtration, water changes, the right balance of males and females, or all males, etc., you could do a 40 breeder in both, but it is a lot of work. So over here, I've got a 40 breeder with all females. I've got another 40 breeder down below with juveniles growing. I've got two 55s right here that you guys can't see that have juveniles growing, and then this is my 75-gallon Mbuna tank over here. Anyway, so yes you can, but should you? And that answer again is yes and no. So if you are a really good fish keeper, if you're experienced, if you know how to target feed your fish, then I would say, yeah, you absolutely can keep Mbuna and your peacocks together. Now, people are going to say, no, you shouldn't do it, and they're saying it for a couple of very good reasons. One being the aggression. So Mbuna typically are much more aggressive than peacocks. Now, African cichlids in general are aggressive fish, so you'll have a lot of fighting, and you've seen in other videos where the fish are fighting over my shoulder. You'll have a lot of fighting from peacocks, and you have a lot of fighting from Mbuna. And what they do is they establish a hierarchy and kind of, ranking from the tank boss down to, the bottom person or the bottom fish as far as the hierarchy and who gets picked on the most and kind of who sets the order in the tank. So anyway, one of the reasons why they say that you shouldn't is because Mbuna are very aggressive, or can be very aggressive, especially certain Mbuna species like the Aratus, Demasoni, Johannes, etc. Some of those can be hyper aggressive, and they can create a lot of stress in the tank, and they possibly can harry and kill a peacock cichlid or several peacock cichlids if you don't have the right balance and the right amount of hiding places. The other reason why people say that you shouldn't mix peacocks and Mbuna together, and this is one of the reasons that I typically don't recommend doing it, and that's because of diet. So again, because Mbuna have a more plant-based diet, and that is their need, and that's the way that their body is made up, you have to ensure that they are getting the proper nutrients and the right amount of fibers, the dietary fibers, etc., that they require. If you are feeding your mixed tank a cichlid food that is higher in protein content, and if you're not supplementing that with vegetation and algae types of food, spirulina, etc., you could have problems with your Mbuna. So you've probably heard of Malawi bloat. It's an intestinal issue. That could happen with your Mbuna if they are getting the foods that are designed for the peacocks. So that is the hardest thing about having a mixed tank, is feeding them. So even if you have proper balance and lots of hiding places in a large tank where you can make sure that the Mbuna aren't killing the peacocks have plenty of places to swim, and the Mbuna have plenty of places to kind of create their own territory, you'll have to make sure that you can target feed your fish. So you'll want to have some type of system to ensure that the Mbuna are getting the foods that they need, and then you can then figure out how to feed the peacocks. So ideally you would feed your Mbuna first, one part of the day, maybe making some type of specific plant-based food like rapashi as an example, getting like the Soylent Green rapashi and putting some peas and green beans and spinach or whatever in that mix, giving it to your fish so that they are eating those vegetation, that vegetable matter. They are getting that algae, the spirulina, etc. And then afterwards, later on in the day, maybe you can do some kind of cichlid pellet, maybe some floating one or something that your peacocks are going to get to that the Mbuna might ignore if they've already had a full belly from the other foods. But anyway, that is a big challenge, is how to feed them. I've talked about tank size a little bit. Again, for having a mixed tank, you're going to want a bigger tank than a smaller tank. So if you have a 40 breeder, you probably really don't want to do a mixed tank. Having a 40 breeder in general for African cichlids can be done, but it's a lot of work. I made videos about this before. But if you are doing a mixed tank, I really recommend a larger tank. Again, your peacocks are going to want that larger 75-gallon plus space for them to have lots of open water, and also allow you to have the right stocking levels to reduce aggression. So you want to have a larger tank. If you are going to do a mixed tank, and I've seen beautiful tanks before, I would recommend a larger tank. So maybe something maybe on a small side, like a 5-foot 90-gallon tank, upwards of 125s, 180s, etc. Longer would be better than more water volume. So if you were looking at tank sizes, I would say that a 6-foot long 125-gallon tank is going to be better than a 4-foot long 120-gallon tank. Even though the volume of water is essentially the same, the extra space is going to help you to kind of spread out those fish. And that might also help you in your target feeding if you're trying to find that Mbuna, group and giving them their, plant-based foods. That might work out a little bit better. So to sum it up, there are pros and cons of mixing your Mbuna and peacocks. My advice would be for you to not do it if you can avoid it. So if you haven't bought any fish yet, I would recommend choosing one or the other. And there are great qualities for both fish, and you can decide again on your own, what's going to be best for you as far as tank size, coloration, etc. What kind of fish you want to have. So if you haven't purchased any fish, then I would say decide which one you want. Or you could be like me and say, hey, I want both, and then have tanks for both. So I've got my peacock tanks, I've got my Mbuna tanks, and I can enjoy both, and I just keep them separate. It makes it a lot easier for me. If you already have the fish and you already have them in one tank together, then again, you really need to figure out how to feed your fish. If your fish are healthy, that's great. Just really keep an eye out to make sure that you don't have any, bloating of the fish going on. If you happen to see some fish dying, and you notice that they have like a distended belly and things don't look right, bloat might be one of the causes of that. So again, if you already have your fish and they're already mixed, don't freak out and don't think that everyone's going to hate you because you're mixing your fish. Just really learn how to take care of your fish in your aquarium and just make sure that each fish is getting the proper diet. I'd love to read down below in the comments what all of you have to say on this topic. Now again, please, if you're going to argue, keep it clean, touch gloves, come out, protect yourself at all times. But anyway, come out clean. I'd love to read down below what your thoughts are on mixing Mbuna and peacocks. I'm sure a lot of you are going to feel very strongly about this, but again, I think that it can be done. I wouldn't recommend it, but if you are going to do it, just make sure that you're on top of what you need to do as far as keeping the tank proper and feeding them properly. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Make sure to check out some of my other videos about African cichlids. Thanks for watching. Catch you on the next one.